This is SpringShoe Tips and Cheats. My name is Pat Bradley. My company is SpringShoe Animation and Illustration, and today we have something a little different. How to make a no-budget animated music video. I never seldom see. This is a video from my brother and my band, Cleaver and Steak Knives, which has a fierce but very small following. So our budget was set at a hard $0. The song was also a cover, so we didn't want to spend too much time on it. But we've been told that playing covers on YouTube is a great way for people to discover new music. So while we sit back and wait for our popularity to soar, I thought I'd show you how it was made. The song is Time Will Crawl from David Bowie's 1987 album, Never Let Me Down. I started storyboarding in a program, strangely enough, called Storyboard. If you're doing storyboards professionally, I highly recommend it. If this is just for fun, then use whatever drawing program you have. So I brought in an audio track and started cutting it into different scenes based on the lyrics and the beat. The song is in 4/4, so I tried to keep the cuts either lined up with the lyrics or with the first beat during the verses. But in the chorus, the accent's on the second beat, so I tried to keep the cuts in line with that accent. He just flew till he burst, till our mouths run dry, till our feet grow small, till our tails fall off. And this is not to say that you need to know music theory in order to cut a video. It's just a starting point and a subtle way to distinguish the verses from the chorus. And I tried to make it more interesting by making the cuts a little irregular. Some go on for one measure and others go on longer. And I began by making some really rough sketches. These were never meant to be seen by anyone but myself. And in Storyboard, I planned out the camera moves for each shot. Again, if you don't have Storyboard, you could do this in a video editor like Final Cut. I did a separate video about animating with a camera, and you can check that out. And here I'm using a lot of the same ideas, where the direction of the pan is consistent between scenes, or there's some subtle rotation going on in other places. Since the characters in the drawings aren't moving, you have to be extra thoughtful with how you're moving the camera. Now there's no one who's better at creating work for themselves than I am, so I had to really restrain myself from making more scenes than I needed to. Remember, this is no budget with a really tight timeline. By the time I was done, I ended up with 23 scenes. Storyboard has some really great drawing tools, but I wanted to add a lot of extra line work and texture. So I kept them really rough and then exported them onto the iPad. The joys and pains of working on an iPad. I like drawing on an iPad because it gets me out of the studio. And I'm able to draw on a patio, under a tree, lying in a hammock. Of course, this is a bit of a fantasy because drawing on an iPad for long periods of time can be murder for your neck. To combat this, I've made a little iPad holder that I can place on top of my Cintiq, but it keeps me stuck in the studio. So the real reason I'm drawing on the iPad is for this program called Procreate, which I highly recommend. I was also really excited to try out these True Grit textures. Incidentally, if there's any companies that want to pay me for this advertising, I'm open to the idea. So the real lesson here is about balance. Something in this video has to be interesting. If it's not going to be the movement of the drawings, it has to be the drawings themselves. With no budget and very little time, you're going to have to draw efficiently. So one thing that helped that was making all the drawings black and white. Didn't have to worry about any color design. And then adding the textures is actually a time saver because it's kind of just filling in the space. It's making things instantly a little bit more interesting. And another thing that makes the drawings easier is the fact that most of these characters are actually silhouettes. I'd originally planned on bringing these textured drawings into Final Cut and doing the camera work there. But then I decided to take the extra step and bring these textured drawings into Harmony and create some multi-planing camera work there. And yes, there is a link in the description for Harmony as well. I use Harmony for almost all my animation, and you can check that out. But for these, you could do the same thing in something like After Effects or Apple Motion. And I know I've said it before, but I will make a separate video on multi-planing camera work. I did a little research on the song and learned that it was loosely based on the Chernobyl meltdown in 1986. In my interpretation, I took some of that, but I didn't want it to be necessarily the Soviet Union and communism. So I invented these flags that appear throughout the video. Not a hammer or a sickle, it's just a icon of a wrench, and it seemed open-ended enough. One of the lines early on in the song is, "I would not challenge a giant," and I interpreted that to be a political giant, a political party. And some of the lyrics in the chorus are, "Till our mouths run dry, till our feet grow small, till our tails fall off." I saw that as either fallout, like nuclear fallout, or just poverty was turning these people back into animals, where they're physically struggling, crawling around, dying. Anyway, it's just a dark song that I think I've made even darker. I think I may have done the same thing with a few songs I did for Dave Matthews Band. Okay, finally I added some filters in Final Cut, and filters are great because they add a little bit of interest without any work at all. You just plop them right on there. So I started by dirtying things up with the film effect, which adds a little bit of grit and dust and flicker. And then I added a vignette effect to add a little tone and a little focus. And then I'm also using this warp effect from Badass Effects. Netlink is also in the description. And that just adds an interesting warp to some of these, and you can see the best example here, where it's just warping the sides and creating almost a 3D effect. Finally, to accent those beats in the chorus, I used the negative effect. I just made a copy of the clip, added the negative effect, and then added a crossfade, so it creates sort of an explosion to accent those beats in the chorus. From there, I exported it to YouTube, and fame and fortune followed. So it's all pretty simple stuff, but hopefully it keeps your interest for the 2.5 minutes of this song. Then you can take that artwork and go make some t-shirts. Yeah, the link's in the description. So many links in the description, please check them all out. Please like and subscribe and leave comments. I will respond to all of them. David Bowie, rest in peace. Thank you all for watching.